Hi everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the cam chain tensioner replacement on the VFR 800. If you haven't yet watched part 1, I really suggest you go and watch it before you do part 2, the link for which you will find in the description below. And in this episode we're going to deal with the process of replacing the front tensioner, which sits under the tank. There are some unique challenges here doing the front one because of the area and how crowded it is underneath the airbox. And that gives us a few problems to overcome, but don't worry, it's much easier than it actually looks. Right, as you can see, I've got the tank suspended, so the 2 bolts have been taken out here at the top, and I've got the back seat off there, so the 2 bolts are still in the back. You can see them down there, but that one obviously is taken off. Now, what I've had to do is to drain the petrol tank, and I've done that into these 15-litre jerry cans. And that's necessary to take the weight out of the tank and to enable me to sort of manipulate this. So in order to get the tank off completely, which is what I want to do, is to take this fuel bolt out there. But I can't really get to it with my tools, so I'm going to have to take this air filter off, which is going to come off anyway. That's the next thing is to do. I've taken off the flapper tube off the top of the airbox, and I've got to take these pipes out here and here. I think there's a few more of those, but we'll get to those in the following clip. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. Some of it I'll have to do off camera because I haven't got this set up, but the next thing to do is get the airbox off. These are bits of toilet paper, hopefully stopping anything falling down. So let's take a closer look at the airbox components. Okay, so we're at foundersparts.co.uk. I'll sort of bring you over here to take a look at all the parts that are inside the airbox. This is a useful site for a couple of reasons. One is a very good supplier of parts for motorcycles, and I found them to be very, very good. As price levels and stock levels change, I've grayed those parts out. We'll talk about the parts and how they fit together as well. So while we're here, I thought I'd just do that. So I'm going to use a visual effect on this editor to blow up the parts diagram and also part of the parts list, just to make it clearer and more centralized. In the last clip you saw it with this top cover off, but there are 6 screws that go around. You can see the little holes that go around there. So you just undo those and pull it off, simple as that. And underneath there's an air filter, which is where I'm hovering around here, and that fits around that. You can see the outline of that here. That fits over all the stuff that's under the airbox air filter and below the cover, obviously. But more interesting, or as interesting, all the components around it. In order to get more easily to the cam chain tensioner, take this airbox off because it will give me better access and better visibility. These aren't all the components we need to talk about, but these are some of them. So while we're here, I'll just sort of mention them. Right, let's look at the pipes then. So we've got a vacuum chamber here, which sits on the front of the airbox. And there's a pipe which goes all the way around to here. So that might be one that you would need to take off, but you have to just remember where it goes back. And this solenoid, what's it called? Bypass control solenoid. That sits underneath it. You can get away without actually taking this off the case. That's got a screw. Yeah, so they're screwed to it, but you can get away without actually removing those off by just taking the pipes off. So just be careful, that you remember where they go, and if necessary, put a label on the pipe and where it's going to go so you don't forget, because if you miss one, you're going to get all sorts of weird things happening on the bike, these hoses and vacuum hoses. So those are those 2. Inside here is poking this thing here, which is input air. Is it number 15? Yeah, sensor assembly air temperature. I think they call it an IAT sensor, and that goes up in there. So when you screws off here and you remove that, then you're left with what's inside here before you can take this off. Here and here you see 2 examples of the funnels. So these are the 4 ports where the air comes in to the manifold, and then it mixes with the injector below that. So in order to get this bottom bit off, you've got to take these off. So there's 2 screws on each one of these, and there's 4 of them in total. So just take those out, put them to one side with the screws still in, and just take note of there's a different length of barrel, if you like, underneath the ones at the back to the front. That's because this has to be even and its orientation has to be level. and there's a slope going down, so it makes sense the bits leading up to the funnel itself are going to be different sizes in height. There's also, it's not shown here, but there's some foam around the front of all this which needs to be removed. A, because it just needs to be removed temporarily, and or B, because you don't want any of the fluff from the foam falling off into the ports, but actually you should fill those ports with some sort of tissue to stop anything getting in there anyway. So once you've done that, you need to remove the funnels, and once you've got the funnels removed, you'll be able to start to lift the airbox. So from the left hand side of the bike, this is the front by the way, from the left hand side of the bike looking in, if you lift that up, you will see this air temperature sensor has got a small connector, electrical connector coming into it, and you can get your hand in underneath there and unclip it, because if you try and lift this airbox off while this is still connected, you run the risk of breaking the cables. So just gently lift it up. In order to make that easier for you and to also completely decouple this airbox lower half, there's a hose here, plugs into there, and there's another hose here. Which isn't shown on this diagram, but it's just here. You need to unclip those. They've got these squeezy little clips on them. You just press them together and move it further down the pipe so it doesn't fall anywhere. And then you can come around the right-hand side of the bike and you start to lift this off. This here, which is 14, which is a sensor map or map sensor, whichever one we called it. You can't see the electrical cables on here, but there are two connectors. There's one at the back, and there's another one coming up to it on the side. But there's also a pipe which leads up through the body and underneath, and it plugs in. That's quite a tight fit, and that goes in underneath this map sensor. So once you remove that, because that's the easiest way to do it, pull it off. Yeah, so once it's off, then put a bit of masking tape around it, write on it what it's for, and put it to one side so you don't lose it. You'll need that when you go to put everything back together, otherwise you might forget. Hopefully with those steps in place, having removed those pipes here, these two pipes there, and remove the connector for this and the electrical connections coming into here, you'll be able to then lift this bottom assembly out. Just be careful, don't act quickly or roughly with it, because if you've forgotten something you might tear it off. So once you've done that, lift it up at the back and then lift it back a little bit and then up and out, and you should be able to remove it. And under that, then you'll be able to see quite clearly the throttle bodies, where the fuel rail is, and also you'll be able to see the injectors, which we're not doing in this particular video, but you will see the next thing, which is a big boot. Right, once you got this off, there's a big rubber boot which contains some electrical connections in front of this right hand side of the lower half of the airbox. You'll need to disconnect that, but then there's also a pipe underneath that. So this is actually quite well hidden, this chain tensioner, and it requires you to take a lot apart before you can actually get the chain tensioner out. So this may have looked quite complicated actually, but it's really quite simple. Once you get your head around it and you've seen it a few times, it's really not that bad, and it's fairly easy. I can take one of these off in about 5 minutes now. So let's get on with the next bit. Okay, so once we've got the airbox off completely, I said to you that we'd need to undo some more stuff. So the pipes are being taken off. You can see that pipe's open there, and there's various other pipes that have gone missing off it and so forth. Obviously the map sensor, not obviously, but the map sensor is gone because it's still attached to the bottom half of the airbox, and so has this other vacuum chamber thing here on the right hand side. So we would have been left, before I took this apart, we would have been left with this boot obscuring the cam chain tensioner at the front here, right here where I'm pointing now. So this boot would have come right across there, and that plug would have been into there. Yeah, so we'll have to take off all these out of the boot. Otherwise you won't be able to do anything. And then further down here, there is a tube which goes into that spline right where my cursor is now. So that's been pulled off because that goes all the way around this thing, and with the combination of that and this tube going around it, you just can't extract this. So this is sitting here, that tube there is plugged onto there, but I've taken it off temporarily and I'll just put it there. So you can get that out of the way, and then you can carry on and extract that. There's 2 bolts either side. It's exactly the same as episode 1 where we did the rear one. The orientation of the chain tensioner is different because this is pretty much vertical, which kind of makes it easier in a way, but difficult in another way. Because when you get this out, you've got to be very careful that you don't lose the screws. You've got to be very careful that you don't lose the gasket. So you just need to be very careful when you pull it out, and you also need to be very careful that you don't pull the cap off the end of the sprung loaded tensioner. So what that means is we have to take this bolt off, and then we have to get a adjustment tool, which is that small little tool that comes with the tensioner that we saw in episode 1. And we have to wind that spring up and then put it in the little holes in it, locate it every now and again as we're going around, getting it tighter and tighter until it's tight and it won't go any further. Then maybe back it off and put it in one of the locating holes. That means your extended sprung loaded tensioner bolt is right the way back off the lifter now, and then all you have to do, obviously you've got to take off these side bolts and you've got to just gently feel your way to pull it out, because you will feel potentially some resistance when you pull it out, but you shouldn't pull it out with any resistance. So it's a case of positioning this as you pull it out, twisting it around a little bit, feeding it but not putting it until it becomes free, and eventually it will just simply come out and then the job is done. So when you pull that out, the 2 bolts located at either side will hopefully stay in their holes, and also hopefully the gasket will stay on top of that as well. If you're very careful, you should be okay. So now before you do anything else, take the cap off the old tensioner on the end of the push rod and fit it to the new one that you're going to insert. Now you need to take the tool out of the old one and screw up the new one so it's brought the push rod right the way back in, and then locate it in one of the locating slots. Once you've done all that, you can put that in, you can bolt it up, and then you can start to and remember to remove the tensioner tool, right, the wind up tool, and you'll hear a snapping noise and it will go onto the chain just like it was in episode 1. Seal it up with the bolt that you put in there, the one that came out of the original one. And then you should be good to start reassembling everything. This is the bit of foam I was talking about. On mine, it had actually come completely off the rubber, so I just removed it entirely. And when this all went back in again, I just squeezed it in there. I didn't bother gluing it to this rubber substrate here. And that is pretty much it. Filming this was an absolute nightmare, and in the end I couldn't film moving this very easily because there's only me, I didn't have a cameraman. So that's why I showed you in the exploded detail all of the component parts, so you had an idea of that before you looked at this. What you got to remember to do is to put that pipe there that was obscuring the tensioner back onto this spline here and do it up, and then carry on and do everything else, put everything else back, put these big pipes in and so on. Well, I hope you found this video useful and informative, and if you did, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.